So the WNBA just released its Kia 2024 MVP Ladder, and you'll never guess who's not in the top 5, if you will. The usual suspects are actually in this particular list. Here is your top 5 list. A'ja Wilson, Napheesa Collier, Sabrina Ionescu, Breanna Stewart, and Alyssa Thompson. And of course, we have 2 honorable mentions. One is Caitlin Clark, and the other one is Kalia Cooper. I just have to say to all of you, North America, that it is interesting once again to see how the WNBA continues to shift its goalposts around. On today's Underrated Pod, we are going to talk about that and a whole lot more. But before we get into it, the commissioner of the WNBA was actually on CNBC's Power Lunch a little earlier in the day. She was actually talking about the Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese rivalry, but there's a couple points of this video that I felt actually fit into this particular story. I'm going to go ahead and play the video for you now. Back with some thoughts in a bit.
Right now, we do sit at this intersection of culture and sport and fashion and music. Like, the WNBA players are really looked at now as kind of cultural icons.
True.
And when you have that, you have a lot of attention on you.
Okay, look, there is a lot of attention on the WNBA, and basically everybody and their brother, including myself, is keeping a close eye on things. And I like to point out when things aren't right. And clearly, this most valuable player ladder list that they put out a few days ago, which had Caitlin Clark as an honorable mention, is just absolutely ridiculous.
There's no more apathy. Everybody cares. It is a little that Bird Magic moment, if you recall, from 1979 when those 2 rookies came in from a big college rivalry, one white, one black. And so we have that moment with these 2. But the one thing I know about sports, you need rivalry. That's what makes people watch. They want to watch games of consequence between rivals. They don't want everybody being nice to one another. So the social media is different today than it was in 1979 when it didn't exist. But, you know, I always tell the players, you know, I was told a long time ago, if someone's typing something in and you wouldn't ask their advice, ignore it. So it's a balance, but certainly from a marketing dollars, but corporate partners are stepping up to endorse these players. Much more so than they were 5 years ago, because they see the benefit of having women and diverse women representing their brand.
I agree.
So that's the cagey commissioner of the WNBA. And in her defense, all commissioners are actually supposed to be cagey. I have to say the shifting goalposts of the WNBA, which I'm sure are actually led by the executive management team, and if you will, the commissioner of the WNBA, I'm sure we're made aware of this latest drop of the WNBA most valuable ladder that Kia puts out. And I'm sure at some point somebody had to have said, how can Caitlin Clark not be in the top 5? Now, I am not going to sit here and try to make the argument with anybody out there that A'ja Wilson is not this year's most valuable player. It is clear to me that A'ja Wilson has been the best player in the W all season. I have no problems with Napheesa Collier being number 2 or 3 on this list. She has been so impactful for the Minnesota Lynx this season. Where this list actually loses me starts with Sabrina Ionescu, not so much with Breanna Stewart, but then there's Alyssa Thompson. So I have Alyssa Thompson not in my top 5. I've got Caitlin Clark actually in at number 3 in my list, and I moved Sabrina Ionescu down to number 5. We are going to get into these statistics. Now, for those of you out there that are going to say, well, a rookie shouldn't be able to win the most valuable player of the year award, those people probably did not follow the WNBA back in 2008 when, of course, Candace Parker in her rookie season won both the Rookie of the Year as well as the league's most valuable player. Now, I pulled up the stats comparisons for you, and I do also want to point out that the game is different today than it was back in 2008. Certainly, there are significantly more three-pointers taken today, and the game is definitely faster now than it was back in 2008. The other main difference I think worth pointing out here is, one of these people on this particular picture is a point guard, and the other one isn't. I'm not taking anything away from the great Candace Parker. She was absolutely amazing throughout her career, and certainly back in 2008 when she was playing for the Sparks, certainly deserved to actually win the trophy as she did. But when I think about this year's Most Valuable Player of the Year award, I can't help but wonder how Caitlin Clark has been left off of this top 5 list. It actually makes absolutely no sense to me at all, North America. I do not understand why the WNBA continues to play the shifting goalpost game, if you will, with us. Now, I'm pulling up an image for you all, which shows Collier, Wilson, and Clark, so you can actually see the side-by-side comparison to see their stats. And I think this is a great way of actually looking at their stats. Now, I didn't include Ionescu in here because the Ionescu argument shouldn't even be an argument at this point. Ionescu and Clark basically both average the same amount of points per game. Clark actually has more rebounds per game and averages 2.5 more assists per game than Ionescu does. Ionescu is also playing on the New York Liberty, which of course was in the WNBA championship series last season. Whereas the Indiana Fever was the worst team in the W last year, and we've seen what the team has done to this point. So when you look at this, you can actually even begin to make the argument, if you want, that Collier actually shouldn't be number 2, that you could actually make the argument that Caitlin Clark should be number 2 and Collier should be number 3. I'm not going to do that. I'll leave that up to you. I'd love to know what your thoughts are on who you think the most valuable player really is in the WNBA. But I do want to point out an important thing, that the most valuable player award tends to not just be about statistics. Now, when Joel Embiid actually won his award, it probably could have gone to the Joker instead of Embiid, but it was Embiid's turn to win the award, if you know what I mean. If you're considering or even factoring in just a bit of the impact that these players not only have had on their teams, but have had on the actual sport and the entire league, then you would absolutely have to consider Caitlin Clark at the number 2 position. And you will see some people out there actually make the leap to say she deserves to be the most valuable player in the W this season. Now, A'ja Wilson was out the other night, and the team still played really well without her there. But that's not the point I want to make. The impact that Caitlin Clark has had on the W and on women's basketball and on women's sports in general should not be underestimated and treated sort of the way that the WNBA executive team has been treating it. If you will, there's the shifting goalposts. Now, I'm going to read for you this absolutely just fantastic thing that the W actually put out. So they have their list of the top 5 players, and then they have their honorable mentions. And I mentioned Kalia Cooper is an honorable mention. Here's what they said, and I'm putting this up for you about Caitlin Clark. While the Fever underwent understandable woes in the first month of the season, by the way, the WNBA gave the Indiana Fever the toughest schedule in the league during the first 3 weeks of the season. They played the most games as well. Indiana is 14-6 over their last 20 games, including 2 massive wins coming out of the All-Star break. Clark has found a synergy with her teammates and an elite comfort on the floor as a facilitator and creator. She's knocking on the door of first-team All-W and a top 5 finish in MVP voting. So they admit it here, even though they have her at number 6, they admit in this particular statement that she is most likely going to finish in the top 5. And if I were voting, I would probably have her in either at number 2 or number 3 in the list. A'ja Wilson has just been that dominant of a player. I mean, 27 points a game. You can't, knock that at all. All the rebounds. Most valuable player this year in the W is clearly, in my opinion, A'ja Wilson. But Caitlin Clark is absolutely in the conversation. And that's the point I want to make, which is why I don't understand why the WNBA continues to shift goalposts. They admit it here, and yet they don't have her in their current top 5. Now, I don't want to take anything away from Alyssa Thompson at all. We looked at what Caitlin Clark's stats were. Alyssa Thompson puts together some phenomenal stats. 10.6 points a game, 8.7 rebounds, and 7.7 assists. Those are huge numbers for the position that she actually plays in the W. But at the end of the day, do I think she's been more impactful on the Sun than Caitlin Clark has been to the Indiana Fever, which once again finished in last place last year? Look, to me, the answers are pretty obvious, which is why I don't understand why the league office can't actually read the tea leaves. All right, tell me what you think, North America. I want to hear from you, please. Go ahead and drop in your comments for the Underrated Pod. I am Dave DeBaugh, wishing you all a tremendous rest of your sports viewing day. To the cool new music we go.
This is Phoenix.